Hello everybody, it's Karen. Thanks for stopping by. I've got a video today that is all about stepping up your die cuts and your border dies in a couple of different ways. So you can see here I've got the inky color. It's beautiful paper. It's the 6x6 pack, and that is the Allura stained glass background die that I've die cut from black cardstock. Now I actually cut two of these. I've only glued one on, but you can see I am now fussy cutting that out. Now to do this technique you need a glue that will dry tacky. So the scrapbook.com glue dries nice and tacky. I believe the Tombow Mono glue dries tacky. The Cosmic Shimmer Flake and Glitter glue will. It just has to be a tacky glue when it's dry. So here you can see I'm just going in through those die cut openings, adding some glue to the background. And the hard part is you have to put that aside and let it dry. Now when it dries, it will go clear like this, and it's very tacky. So I've got some Cosmic Shimmer Gilding Flakes here in gold, and I am just putting some of those leaves down onto those very tacky areas, and then I just used a brush to brush them into that dry glue. And because it is tacky when it's dry, it keeps all that gilding flakes in place. Now don't worry about the lines because I did cut a second one. Now had I thought about it, I would have backed that with a double-sided adhesive tape rather than gluing it. So that might be something to think about, but I'm just gluing it over top, and now with the shadow outline I've die cut that from gold foil, and I can just mat this right onto that. And then because it was the gold foil, I just set it under some acrylic blocks to let that dry. Now this is my card front. It's a 5.5-inch square card, and I'm using the outline die to just cut from the center of that because I will put that stained glass piece back in the middle. But that blue just looked too bright to me, so I've got the cracked stencil, and I'm using some Distress crackle paste here, and it dries translucent, this one. So I'm putting this on just in a nice thin layer all around the outside where the blue cardstock is. And before it dries, I'm using Distress Spritz Spray in Uncharted Mariner. And I'm just spritzing on right through that stencil. So that will go over all the crackle paste. And then you want to make sure that you dry your stencil or wash your stencil right away. And don't let that stuff dry on it. Now, when it had dried and I looked at it, I felt like it was still a little bit bright. So I'm adding on more of the Distress Spritz Spray. And it will go all over everything, but where the crackle paste was, it'll be a little bit darker. So again, I set that aside to dry, and now I'm gluing that down to my card base, and you can see it's quite a bit darker than it was originally. And a little bit shiny, which I quite liked. And so then I can set this stained glass piece in. I was just trying to see which way I liked it to go. And then I just glued that and put it in place. Now for the sentiment, I took one of the So Extra White sentiments and I just matted it on that same blue, a scrap of that blue that I had. I did put foam tape to the right of that because the height on the left is a bit higher. And that was my card. I really wasn't sure what I was going to use this one for, so I was trying to keep it fairly generic. Okay, so for my second card, I am using the Christmas Poinsettia border die, and I have matted that one layer onto a piece of the Nature Stroll festive paper. I had that scrap, and so I'm just using the red wooden side. And I am only just putting the glue in the berries now for this part. So I put it in, set it aside to dry, so it's gone clear. And now I am using a piece of foil. Now this is laminating foil, so it's not hot foil. Hot foil will not work for this technique, but all the other foils will. And so this was a scrap, and I'm just pressing it into those berry areas. You can kind of feel it through your fingers, and just making sure it's covered. If it's not covered, just go back in with the foil again and cover it. Now I forgot to include in here, I covered the berries with an anti-static powder tool, and now I'm going into all those leaves and adding glue in. And you can see there, it's not perfect glue coverage, but it's enough for what we're going to do. And so again, you have to set that aside to dry, and now I'm putting in the same gold gilding flakes into the leaves. So the berries will be red and the leaves gold. So once all that was done, I added the top layer die cuts, pressed it all down in place, and then I'm adding small strips of gold mirror cardstock along the top and the bottom of the die cut. You can see I didn't quite have my white layers exactly the right height, so I was just sort of covering up that mess. So there it is. It's quite pretty in real life. And now to turn that one into a card, I've got an A2 size card base that I'm spattering on some Distress Oxide Festive Berries, and then I'm going to glue this in place on the diagonal, and I will trim off those edges then. It's a very simple card. All I did was I added that Merry Christmas sentiment and I left it as that. I thought of doing more but chose not to. Okay, so for the next card I've got, it's a 5.5-inch square card again, and I'm using the Be Happy 12 by 12 papers. I just chose that sunflower paper for this one, and I'm using the sunflower border die. And I'm gluing that right down to the bottom. Now for this one I am using this Tacky When Dried gel medium. It's from the Crafters Workshop, TCW. And I'm just brushing in with a small paintbrush that gel down into where the petals are for the sunflowers. And again, you have to set this aside and let it dry. Luckily they don't take too long to dry these, but it's quite tacky when it's dry. So I've got a scrap of foil again, of gold foil this time. And I'm just pressing that right down into where the petals are. Again, you cannot use the hot foil for this. It has to be the laminating type of foils. But it's a great way to use your scraps, you guys. It's really good because you just keep going back and forth with it. If it doesn't come off perfectly, you go back in with it. I went over this a few times to get it into all those little nooks and crannies. And if you're still not happy, put some more of the gel on and let it dry, and then go in again with the foil. Now here I'm using my anti-static powder tool over that foil because this time I'm going to go over the leaves with that gel medium and get all of the leaves covered. And this time, now that the gel has dried, I'm sprinkling on my, well, that's a micro glitter from the dollar store here. And I'm just sprinkling that on, and then I use my finger to really push that into that very tacky gel. And then spend a half an hour cleaning up glitter. But I thought it was worth it. I don't really like getting my glitter out terribly, but I did for this. So there you can see the gold and the gold foil and the glitter, but I wanted a bit more. So on the base or the center of that sunflower, I'm putting more of the gel medium. And now this is a gilding flake from Cosmic Shimmer. It's quite an oxidized foil, and so it's got browns and greens and rust colors, and I just wanted that to show through a little bit at the center there. So there it is, all finished with the second layer on. And to make that into a card, I just added that information strip on the very bottom, and I fussy cut the gnome and the flower cart from one of the 12 by 12 papers and just added that sentiment. So that's that card. Okay, so here's another one. This time I'm using the Wave Borders metal die, and I just chose this bubbly one from the two. There's the two that go in that set. Again, I'm using that inky color paper, and I die cut from this more blue toned one. I just wanted, this is more oceany, this one. I try not to look at the back because I love the back, but I needed the blue side today. So I'm gluing this onto a scrap of card, and I am just fussy cutting out around it. Now I left a little bit of a white border, just like you would if you were cutting out a stamped image. But I just like that hint of white from, coming from in behind. Now for this one, I'm going to use my glossy accents, and I filled in all of those bubbles with glossy accents. Didn't take too long, but before the glossy accents dried, right after I did it actually, I'm sprinkling on some of this, it's a clear, very sparkly glitter from Cosmic Shimmer. Just sprinkling that on over top of the glossy accents, and it will stick to the glossy accents. So you can tap off all the excess of this. So that's what I'm doing there, just tapping it off. And you can see that it's quite a nice white sparkly glitter, that one. Now my camera didn't pick this up terribly well. I don't think it's easy to see the sparkle in this, but in real life it's really quite pretty. Now I did do two of those borders just because I'm trying to do an ocean scene. So I've done two and let them dry. Again, I have a 5.5-inch square card, and my idea was I was going to have these go on the top and the bottom. So in the middle, I just did some ink blending with Distress Oxide inks. That's Uncharted Mariner, Cracked Pistachio, and Speckled Egg on top. And I spattered a bit of water onto those. And I'm just positioning it now where I want it to go, and then I'm penciling it down so I know where to glue this on. So here I'm just gluing that background piece in. Now I've used the Fish Family metal dies here, and I've cut them from the Inky Colors, just scraps of that Inky Color cardstock. And some of these, I really like this fish actually. I thought he was really quite pretty. So I've cut those. Now I wanted some seaweed. Don't laugh too hard. I'm using the Spotty line square die here. And I've cut that from a multicolored green piece of scrap cardstock, but I'm using the negative pieces for this. So I still have the positive I could use for something else. But I thought these pieces ended up looking a little bit like seaweed. Just go with that. You have to use your imagination a little bit here, but I just thought I wanted something in there instead of just fish. So I'm positioning those. I've glued them to the back of that bottom border, and then I can glue all of this down. Now, for the seaweed, the second and the fourth pieces are not glued in the middle. All the others are glued down along their length, but the second and fourth piece of seaweed are only attached at the bottom, so I can, weave the fish in and out of that. So now I can glue all of this down and hopefully pick up those two pieces of seaweed and trap them inside. And then you can see here I can fish, or weave this fish through that seaweed. So that's all I'm doing there, trying to get him into that. So you can see that one's not quite glued down maybe at the top. So I just sort of positioned my fish where I wanted them, and then I've glued them down, and I've die cut that birthday twice from the white card and once from the silver foil cardstock. And on my computer I printed off the word fishes, and because I have a laser printer, I could laminate that with a silver foil. So I've just tucked that in at the end of the word birthday, and all that was left was I added a few little air bubbles of glossy accents just to make it look like the fish were actually breathing underwater. So there you can see it now, the glossy accents have dried. Not sure you can really see that glitter in the photo here, but in real life it's definitely there, and it's really quite pretty. So that's a few ideas for you on how to embellish those die cuts and dies that we've got. There's so many ways you could do that. I hope I've given you a little inspiration today. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope you're having a great day.